You know, if I didn't have to worry about copyright strikes, I'd probably be singing something from Newsies right about now. You know, the real fun thing about making that reference is, thanks to the fact that the school my kid goes to, the musical that they did in the spring was Newsies, it's now so much easier for me to explain to her what the heck is going on in Hollywood right now, because she's got a point of reference. Anyways, striking! It continues with the writers, and now the actors are striking. So, by the time this video comes out, they'll have been on the picket lines for about a week. I am kind of shooting this a bit in advance. I have a lot going on this coming week, but I'm also kind of assuming it's not going to be resolved over the course of a week. If it does, I will look quite foolish. But then again, if it does, I probably will have to scrap this video and do something altogether, so you'll never know anyways. Regardless, SAG-AFTRA. That is the union for film and television, as well as radio personalities and voice actors. They are now on strike. Now, if you are wanting some background on the writer's strike, which is now at this point the longest running strike, definitely of the writers union, I think of any union in Hollywood at this point, you can see the earlier video I did. Pretty much everything I said there still stands. It's just been dragging on continuously. The actors' strike is, by its nature, far more disruptive than the writer's strike was. And the writer's strike was already pretty disruptive. But I kind of talked about in that video how the actual trickle-down effects of a writer's strike won't become evident until months, maybe even a year or so later, when all the projects that were rushed into development on unfinished scripts before the start of the strike start coming out. You see how bad they actually are. You know, that's how we ended up with things like X-Men Origins Wolverine, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, etc., etc. The impact of an actor strike, way more immediate. How immediate? Well, the cast of Oppenheimer literally walked out during the premiere. Because when actors strike, it's not just the acting that they don't do. They don't do the promotional stuff either. Another quite amusing premiere-related thing that happened was Disney still went ahead with their premiere for the Haunted Mansion, even though no actors were going to show up. And so they just sent character performers, like from their parks, like Mickey and Minnie Mouse, and Cruella, and Maleficent. Okay, that's a choice. Oh, we'll be coming back to Disney, in particular, current CEO Bob Iger, in a little bit. As far as major projects that have shut down, it's a long list, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but examples, Deadpool 3, that had to shut down shooting. Second season of Sandman on Netflix, that had to shut down shooting, as well as innumerable others. How all just had to close down, stop work, regardless of where they were in the production. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this, again, compared to the writer's strike, is that there really wasn't a lot that could be done by the studios on this. Now, as I mentioned already in the other video and kind of alluded to here, with the writer's strike, when that was looming, they were perfectly capable of launching into production stuff with unpolished scripts, half-finished scripts, scripts that were given a shorter time frame to be finished than would have otherwise happened so that they could go into production before the strike started. Or even after the strike started, just with the knowledge that the script couldn't be revised anymore. The thing is, though, while you can make a writer or a writing team even work faster on a tighter budget, less time, you can't really do that with actors. You can't make them act faster, especially because the speed of production is not solely dependent on them. The amount of time a film or television show takes to shoot is completely logistically based. The amount of time that writers need, like, there are logistical concerns. How long will it take to physically write it out? But aside from that, if you want to crunch writers really badly in terms of how much time you're allowing for them, you can. There isn't a ton of condensing you can do on a film shoot. Like, there are some things you can do. There you can try and get night shoots, get more stuff shot in a day. But first of all, how much you're able to do that is already kind of hampered by not only actors' unions, but the unions of the various other professionals who work on a set. And just logistically, there's only so much you can shoot in a day. So when the writer's strike was looming, they could rush the writing process to get stuff into production. They couldn't rush stuff that was in the process of being shot through the shooting in order to get it done before the actor strike. That's simply not feasible. So all this stuff just gets closed down. And we're really going to see the impact of this because assuming that it goes forward, which it should, but San Diego Comic-Con is going to be pretty bare bones this year because it is happening the same weekend this video goes up. Now, a bunch of studios already weren't planning on attending at all, basically assuming that the strike was likely to happen. But even stuff that was planned had to be completely canceled. There was going to be stuff related to Good Omens Season 2. That has been pared down to just an advanced screening of, I think, the first 1 or 2 episodes. Marvel nor DC are going to be in Hall H this year. Normally, one of them, it stakes that out as a major thing. That's not happening. All this stuff has to be pared down because who do audiences get most excited about? The actors. They're the ones who get sent to these things to promote this stuff. And they're not going to do that now. Now, it's probably worth going over what the sticking points appear to be in regards to the actor striking. And a lot of it is actually very similar and runs very parallel to why the writers are striking. There are 2 major areas. The first is compensation. The second is AI. Dealing with compensation, the specifics and the nuances and the nuts and bolts of it are a bit different from the writers, but ultimately they come down to the same core factor. The nature of production of both film and television, as well as how these things are compensated, especially in the age of streaming, have changed in a way that the old payment structures that used to enable actors to make a livable wage are no longer working. They're not making what they need to make. Now, I know it's very easy when we think of actors to think of the big name over title actors. You know, your Tom Cruise, The Rock, Nicole Kidman, innumerable people who are making millions of dollars per project. The thing is, though, the union doesn't just represent them. About a quarter of working actors, those being people who it is their primary, if not exclusive form of income, only make about $30,000 a year. And if that sounds like a livable wage to you, keep in mind the vast majority of actors live either in Los Angeles or New York City. $30,000 a year is not a livable wage in either of those cities. So the union has a lot of people to look out for, not just the big names that you tend to think of when you think of actors. And that also includes background actors. And we'll get into that a little bit when we talk a little bit more about the AI. And let's be clear, residuals for actors have always been subject to some really screwy economics. Someone who recently spoke out about that was John Cusack. He highlighted his film Say Anything. You know the one where he holds the boombox up. Everybody knows that one. It wasn't a major hit at the time that it was released, but it's become pretty iconic and a bit of a cult hit since then. He did have in his contract that he was supposed to get some royalties off that. He never has, because officially, on paper, that film, over its lifetime, has lost $44 million. That's pretty impressive considering the movie only had a budget of $13 million and it didn't have a major marketing push and has been re-released in multiple home video formats. Yet somehow it managed to lose $1 million a year every year since it came out. More than that. That's pretty impressive. That's Hollywood accounting. But as far as compensation goes, the way things have changed in the era of streaming with shorter seasons, a lot more things now being done, fewer episodes per season, and what actually results in terms of the payment up front as well as the residuals, actors just aren't making what they used to, just flat out. Most of them are not. And the union feels very strongly that they are not making a appropriate percentage of the revenue being brought in by this incredibly successful industry. So compensation is what these sorts of negotiations are honestly usually about. Whether it breaks down or not, whenever these contracts need to be renegotiated, the sticking point is pretty much always going to be how compensation works. And by and large, part of the job of the unions is to figure out what ways they are currently being shortchanged and possibly exploited, but also to try and look ahead and get ahead of possible ways they might be exploited in the future. And that's where we get to AI. Now, AI in relation to actors is a point of concern for the same reasons it was with writers. It is not currently feasible for generative AI, which is already kind of dicey in terms of legality, particularly when it comes to copyright and likeness rights, because it's not truly generative. It is reiterative. It has to have reference material in order to generate anything, but I'm not going to break down the very nature of AI. But even setting aside the inherent legal issues with AI and whether or not it is already running afoul of existing copyright laws or copyright laws that may catch up with it, with where it's currently going, even setting all that aside, it can't currently just create a performance of an actor, just like it can't currently create a workable shooting script. But what it could feasibly do in the future is create performances for background material, for second unit shooting, for things other than the here's our lead actor, the name over the title type actor, we're getting a close-up. Sure, you can't use AI to do that, but maybe you could use it to fill in some gaps, do some pickup shooting, some long shots, so that they're not on set as many days. You don't have to pay them as much. One particular story that came out, this was cited by Duncan Crabtree Ireland, who is the chief negotiator for SAG-AFTRA. He said that what the studios had proposed in regards specifically to background actors was that they be paid, any given background actor be paid for 1 day's work, get scanned, and then that would allow the studio to use that scan and AI to create a background performance of them without compensation and in perpetuity. Now, the AMPTP, which is representing the major studios and producers and executives, disputes that characterization. They claim that what the proposal actually was that background actors, yes, would only be paid for 1 day. They would be scanned, but then that scan data would only be used to create background performances for that movie, and their scan data could not be used in other projects without compensation, negotiations, etc. Now, if we assume that what the studios and producers are saying is the more accurate version of what they were proposing, that's still not good because you're cutting the number of days that they're going to get to work. Background actors, depending on how long a shoot goes, particularly in large crowd scenes, some of the bigger, more elaborate stuff that has a lot of background extras, you're looking to cut them out of multiple days of work, weeks of work, and compensate them only for a single day, even if it's true that you can't use that data again in another project without compensating them for it again, that's still a massive, insane pay cut that you are looking to be able to do to them. And also, can we be honest? Even if their original proposal was, oh, no, we'd only use it more in the same movie, not in other stuff. Okay, that seems really easy to abuse, though. Because do you think people are going to be able to notice in every single movie the random background figure, out of focus, one of hundreds, is their face that is being used without compensation? Do you think they'd be able to prove it? And that's not even getting into the idea that with that scan data, they could simply tinker with it in AI a little bit so it doesn't look completely like the original person. And then how the heck is that person ever going to prove that their scan data was used? So even if the guy from SAG-AFTRA exaggerated, I don't think he's being unfair in what could potentially happen, even if that would technically be an abuse of the proposed contract stipulations. But, let's be honest, if it's that easy to do, some of them are going to do it. Maybe not all of them, but some of them will. Just don't give them the opportunity. I'm with SAG. Let's be very clear. I'm with SAG across the board on this. Just like I was with the WGA when they first started striking. I'm siding with them against these studios. And AI is a concern across the board. Even the Directors Guild, which is not striking and does in fact have a tentative agreement with the studios and the executives, they have also put forward concerns about AI. Specifically in the contract that they have, it says duties performed by DGA members must be assigned to a person, and generative artificial intelligence does not constitute a person. Now, of course, the studios do have their own justifications for why they think this is unreasonable, but unfortunately some of them have also said some stuff that really does very clearly paint them as the bad guys in all this. Because, as I said, some people might think, oh, actors are striking, they think of big-name actors in the Hollywood Hills with millions of dollars, but as I said, that's not all that is affected by this, and the studios are not doing much to make themselves look good right now. First, there was an article that came out in Deadline where a number of executives, all of whom spoke anonymously, had a number of things to say. However, I'm going to narrow it down to this choice quote. The end game is to allow things to drag on until union members start losing their apartments and losing their houses. This sentiment was reiterated by similar sources, with one calling it, quote, a cruel but necessary evil. They're flat out admitting that holding out the strike, dragging it out, and refusing to give in until people start losing their homes is evil, but they will do it. Yeah, that's generally not something that the good guys do, is it? And nobody's taking this line down, the actors especially. Ron Perlman did not mince words at all when responding to that bit.
You wish that on people. You wish that families starve while you're making $27 million a year for creating nothing. Be careful, motherfucker. Be really careful.
Now, the thing is, quotes like that in Deadline either shows that these people in the executive level are trying to run interference, like that they're hoping that this is posturing. They'll make it look like they're going to be willing to wait things out until people start losing their homes in the hope that it will bring the, at the time it was mostly the writers, but in the hope that it will bring both unions back to the negotiation table. Or they're very, very stupid and don't understand the position that they're in. Because right now, the studios are actually pretty vulnerable. There have been a number of very high-profile underperforming films. This would include the likes of Elemental, The Flash, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And then there's all the cuts that have been having to streaming services. They claim because of the expense of keeping all this stuff on their servers. So right now, that makes these studios pretty vulnerable. Now, they may try and play that to their advantage and try and plead poverty. Like, look, we're losing money at the box office. We're having to make these cuts to streaming services. Clearly, we don't have the money to give you what it is you want. And there are some who have basically expressed as much. In particular, there's Bob Iger over at Disney. Told you we'd come back to him. In regards to the strikes, he said, "It's very disturbing to me. There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic. And they're adding to the set of challenges that the business is already facing that is, quite frankly, very disruptive." Yeah, Bob. It's disruptive. It's a strike. It's supposed to be disruptive. If it didn't disrupt things, it'd be a pretty bad strike, wouldn't it? And in regards to Bob Iger in particular, or anybody, but we're going to single him out because he's the one who chose to open up his mouth and put his name on some statements. It's pretty infuriating, given the compensation that we know he gets. Or actually, I'm going to let Sean Gunn take this one.
In 1980, CEOs like him made 30 times what their lowest worker was making. Now Bob Iger makes 400 times what his lowest worker is. And I think that's a shame, Bob. And maybe you should take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, why is that? And not only why is that, is it okay? Is it morally okay?
Yeah. Like seriously, in an ethical society, cuts would start at the top. Because before making that stupid, callous statement. Bob Iger did actually point to some problems that were self-inflicted by the studios. He talked about how interest in the Marvel properties and the Star Wars properties had dwindled, and he partly singled out that they had oversaturated the market. Too much stuff. People were getting fatigued. And he's not wrong. But he wants to take that loss out on actors and writers and everybody who isn't an executive, when it's the executives who are making those calls that made things bottom out and made it so you aren't making as much money as you think you should. I would say the ones who should be getting their salaries cut are the ones making the decisions, Bob. Or you know what? I'm going to hand over the mic one more time, though this time to somebody who you might not be as familiar with. Mr. Nutterbutter?
Eat shit, Bob.
Thank you. Love that guy. And yeah, people aren't taking lightly Bob Iger's comments either. Fran Drescher, who is the current president of SAG-AFTRA, slammed him harshly, and rightfully so. Because, as I said, he's not posturing as much. He is kind of saying, like, look, we're already going through tough times. You're going to do this now? Yeah, Bob, we're going to do this now. But you have the others that spoke to Deadline in what honestly feels like a borderline propaganda piece to try and make them look stronger than they are. But even if it's not, then it was just them being very, very stupid, because they are not in a particularly powerful position in these negotiations. Because the thing is, at this point, the true customer of these studios, it's not you. It's not me. It's not viewers. They don't really care what we think. It's the shareholders. Everything they do is driven by what will influence the shareholders. That's not to say pleasing customers doesn't matter, because that's about optics, and making it look like the customers don't care or are being driven away will drive down the stock, will anger the investors. And that's why I say these studios are not in a particularly strong negotiating position. Because at this point, these companies pin so much on quarterly earnings. And everything has stopped. All the work has stopped. New stuff that was not already to the point of being in post-production, editing and special effects, etc. If it wasn't already at that point, it stopped. Everything will be impacted by this. Everything will be pushed back. And yes, you can fill your television schedule with, stuff that is non-union. Reality shows being the big one. But that's not the prestige stuff. That's not the stuff that drives engagement. That's not the stuff that drives new people coming to you. That's not the stuff that excites investors. Investors get excited by big new prestige projects. With all that stuff stopped, the stock's going to start taking a hit. And it's not going to take long to do it. The studios are going to do what they can to try and fill in the gap. Like, we already know that Ms. Marvel is going to be repackaged for network television, which I believe it'll be the first time a Disney Plus original that was intended only for the service gets moved to another platform. It's going to premiere on ABC next month, but that's a limited resource. There isn't a lot that they can do, and that only solves the issue of no new stuff on the network. That doesn't solve the issue of new stuff not coming out for the streaming platforms. It's not even a stopgap. But it is the kind of thing that they're stuck doing if they don't want to just fill their entire schedules with reality shows. The thing is, people like Bob Iger are criminally overpaid for what it is they do. I'm sorry, it should be criminal. It should not be legal to make as much more money than anyone employed by him as Bob Iger or any of these CEOs do. It is callous, it is amoral, and it should be criminal. It is at the very least obscene. Like, naked bodies aren't obscene. The salaries of these people, that is obscene. But the thing is, as obscene as his salary may be, you know where the real money is? It's in bonuses and whatever stock he also gets to have. as the head of the company. If the stock starts losing value, that's a hit. And the bonuses are usually contingent on the stock price, majorly if not exclusively. So even though he already makes way too much money, somebody like Bob Iger is suddenly going to be making a bit less than he thought he was going to. He'll have a reason to come back. They all will. Because the only justification they have for the position of power that they hold is that they keep the money flowing. Because they don't create art. They don't create the products, the entertainment, the performances, the scripts. They don't create anything that we enjoy. Their only claim to power is that they keep the money coming. But when that gets disrupted, what is it you do exactly? Why are you here? Why should you be kept in that position? Why should you not be replaced? How many yachts are you going to have to sell? Oh no, what a burden. Yeah, I have no sympathy for these people at all. And while I can empathize with people who are outside of these specific striking unions, who are also seeing their works stop as the sets get shut down, I can and do have some sympathy for them. They ultimately benefit from this as well in the long run. Because if everybody's getting screwed, then everybody's getting screwed. People taking a position, people standing up and saying, hey, you can't treat us like this, that snowballs. Unions have a positive impact on the working conditions and compensation of workers, even those who are not in those unions, if those unions are still in place in those workspaces. So while I have sympathy for anyone who is looking at an immediate financial crunch from this, and I'm not callous to that, I still think this is in the best interest of everybody who, as far as I'm concerned, matters. Because studio heads don't matter. They don't. They absolutely do not. So, if you're like me, and you want to support the actors and the writers, what can you do? Well, here's the first thing you shouldn't do. Don't start boycotting studios or streaming services or networks. They are not asking you to do that, and it doesn't help. And I know this can be a weird point because, like, when I did videos like, say, the one I did on the abuse of the animators in the making of Across the Spider-Verse, I mentioned that I may not be comfortable watching Beyond the Spider-Verse when it comes out. Some people took that as a call to boycott. It wasn't. It was me talking about my own personal comfort level in watching it and why I might not be comfortable when that comes out if it is not in some way delayed and we don't know if the working conditions ever got any better. But that wasn't actually a call to boycott. I don't think I've ever actually done a formal call to boycott. What I have done is explained why I think supporting this or that might have negative effects, or why I personally do not intend to support or see or pay for this or that. But here, let me be very explicitly, boycotting is not helpful. What is helpful is following the actors who are vocal, the organizations themselves on whatever form of social media you can, using the hashtags, vocalizing your support. I know that the online sense of things, like, it feels like it doesn't matter. Like online activism, social media activism, who cares? Well, the thing is, in an industry like the film industry that is all about perception and the sense of how willing the public is to take in what it is you're giving them, like, because entertainment isn't a necessity. Trying to boycott something that is more of a necessity, that's really difficult, especially in a social media sense. So, you know, trying to boycott, I don't know, petroleum products. Good luck. And especially doing it like over social media, But the thing is, again, because of the eyes of the investors and the sense of, do people still like what it is you're doing? Are we still going to make money off this? Should I keep investing into your studio? The public perception of the public supporting the actors and the writers matters. it does help them. And if you want to help more directly, there's the Entertainment Community Fund. Now, this is a fund that is being used to counter exactly what those jackasses who spoke to Deadline are trying to do, which is to starve people out. This is a fund that is used to help ensure that writers, actors, or anyone else impacted by this that is not at the executive level has access to funds to help ensure that they don't lose their housing, that they don't go hungry. So if you want to help most directly, that is the way to do it. The reason boycotting doesn't help, especially in a case like this, is because while negotiations are currently ongoing, these entities do still have to exist at the end of the negotiation. If an actual effective boycott of something like Netflix was done and it had to scale down everything, that doesn't ultimately help the writers or the actors because now there's simply less work there. And boycotts are complicated anyway, but it's a little bit more straightforward when it comes to industry-related stuff like this, specifically when it comes to negotiations and the unions. If you want to support the unions, don't boycott. Share the hashtags. Share your own outrage. And if you are able, a lot of us aren't, but if you are able to donate to the Entertainment Community Fund, that will help. And I wish them the best. I want them to break these studios. I really, really do. And I think they can. Because like I said, the studios are not in a particularly strong negotiating position. They just aren't. They need to be able to tell their investors, okay, we didn't have the best year this year, but here's what we've got coming up. And it's all on schedule and it's all going ahead as planned. And they can't do that right now. Even the ones who have had better years, they can still be going, well, look, we did have a good year, but they still have to be able to tell their investors, and here's why next year's going to be even better. It's hard to sell that idea when you can't make anything. So I think they have the negotiating power in this situation to get what they're after, and I hope they do. So that's the actors' strike. What are your thoughts on this? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. It's how you can support me and ensure that I am able to stay in my home and eat and feed my kid and so on and so forth. Even if you can't help me out that way, there's links in the description for other things that I do, works that I have, ways you can support me. But ultimately, what I want you to remember, especially if you're on the picket line, you are beautiful. You are valid. You are loved. You are the council, and I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.
And now my thanks to my Patreon supporters that make this possible, including Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, T. Love, Auntie Kate 808, Bernabe Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam RDL Taylor, Dave Hall, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. You can get I get all the names right and then I can't talk. If you want to hear me stumble over my tongue after saying your name, it's in the rewards here on the Patreon.